As future clinicians, it is important to understand the neuromuscular demands of different tasks and movements that patients will perform during the rehab process. We know from previous research that muscle contraction type has significant impact on force production and central nervous system activity. Furthermore, research suggests a difference in motor unit activity during concentric and eccentric actions. The purpose of the study was to investigate muscle activity of wrist extensors and flexors during concentric, isometric, and eccentric actions. It was hypothesized that concentric contractions would elicit greater muscular activity than eccentric contractions. In order to conduct this research, 8 individuals volunteered from the Regis University DPT program class of 2021. These volunteers had an average age of 25 years old. To help ensure results were valid, several inclusion and exclusion criteria were used. To be included, volunteers needed to be between 20 and 35, have full range of motion at the wrist, and be able to perform wrist exercises with 5 pounds of added weight. Furthermore, volunteers were excluded if they reported pain or weakness in the wrist or forearm, or if they were allergic to the alcohol or electrode used in the study. In order to record muscle activation of forearm musculature, participants were seated with the elbow supported on a table, desk, or chair, and a total of 6 electrodes were placed on the upper extremity. 2 were placed on both the flexors and extensors, and 2 grounding electrodes were placed on the upper arm. You can see this in the picture included. Participants then performed a maximal voluntary contraction against an isometric manual resistance. Participants then performed 6 separate trials, including eccentric, isometric, and concentric contractions, using both the wrist flexors and extensors. Isometric contractions were performed for a total of 10 seconds, while concentric and eccentric contractions were performed through a full range of motion lasting 5 seconds. Maximal EMG values during each of these trials were recorded and then compared to maximal voluntary contraction values. The percentage of maximal voluntary contraction of wrist flexors and extensors were then calculated across all participants. The results of the study can be seen here in Figure 1. For both flexors and extension, muscle activity, as measured by percentage of maximum voluntary contraction, was greatest for concentric contractions, seen here in orange. Eccentric actions are represented by the green bar. Finally, the variability was high for all conditions, but especially for wrist extensors. Despite this variability, it does appear that wrist flexors and extensors are more active during concentric contractions than eccentric contraction. These results not only support the original hypothesis of the study, but is also similar to the results seen in previous research. It has been proposed that decreased motor unit activity during eccentric contractions may be related to the greater force production capabilities of these contractions. This may mean that less motor units are needed to accomplish the same force output. Proposed mechanisms that allow for this to occur include force contribution from elastic components within muscle during eccentric contractions and potential of selective recruitment of large motor units. Ultimately, this information should play a role in exercise prescriptions used by clinicians during the rehabilitation process. Thank you for listening.